Quick mention before we get into it. This show is built around a framework called the SCOW method. And the full version of it is laid out in the book, The SCOW Method, Your Guide for Total Being Fitness. It walks through all four arenas: heart, mind, body, and soul, chapter by chapter, pairing the biblical foundation with the science behind it, and closes each chapter with practice prompts you can start using that day. Link is in the show notes if you want to check it out. Well, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well out there. Listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio, and you're listening to the SCOW Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Listen, we're still moving our way towards 1 year since my father passed away. And I have to be honest with you. I'm not so sure I'm doing well, but I'm getting through it. And, a lot of people ask me how I'm doing and how things are going in a general sense. And the only thing that I can really say at any point in time is just I'm uncomfortable. I am super uncomfortable right now. And that feels like the best word to use to describe where I am and how I'm feeling. And the thing about it is I have to sit in it. I can't rush through it. I can't try and numb it. I can't, run away from it. I have to sit in it. And I have to sit in it because it's doing something, right? This isn't a malfunction. This is the way I'm processing grief. This is the process of processing grief, The thing about it is this type of discomfort. There are a lot of parallels between this type of discomfort and others. And I've noticed this trend, this thing, like that seems to be true of almost every kind of discomfort. We've been taught to eliminate it on site. The physical kind, the emotional kind, the mental kind, all of it. We've been taught to eliminate it on site. This episode, we're going to talk about the physical kind, though, right? Because somewhere along the way, discomfort became the enemy. Not injury, not even disease, right? The discomfort itself. So this episode is about how the medical and fitness industries have built enormous revenue models around eliminating a category of pain that was never actually the problem. We also going to dig into a little bit what gets lost when you can't tell the difference. Walk into any pharmacy and the message is everywhere. Pain relief in minutes. Stop the aching. Feel nothing. Walk into any fitness culture right now, and you'll actually hear two opposite messages, but they're both competing at the same time. One corner is still pushing the no pain, no gain, grind through it, ignore your body message. And the other corner, often the mobility and recovery crowd, pushes the exact opposite extreme, treating any discomfort at all as damage to be avoided. Both of those fitness camps, along with the pharmacy message, they're wrong in the same underlying way. They all treat pain as a single category, when pain is actually several different signals doing several different jobs. Some pain protects you. Some pain builds you. Some pain is a warning. Confusing these categories is expensive and often permanent. But so let's get to it. Let's get to it real quick. What are these categories of pain that I'm talking about here, right? And there's 4 of them. Okay. So the first one is acute protective pain. Okay. This is the pain that stops you from touching a hot stove, or that makes you limp on a sprained ankle, that keeps you from using an injury before it's completely healed. This pain is actually doing its job, though. It shouldn't be eliminated. It should be listened to. Then there's adaptive discomfort. Now, this is the burn in a muscle during training, maybe the discomfort of having a hard conversation. It could also be like the ache of doing something difficult that produces growth. This isn't damage. It's the signal that something is being built. Then you have chronic warning pain. This is the pain that persists beyond the expected healing window. It tends to return in a pattern that shows up when you do a specific movement or activity repeatedly. This is information. It's telling you that something needs to change, not just be numbed. Then, lastly, there's referred or systemic pain. This pain shows up somewhere different from its actual source, often connected to inflammation, stress, or dysfunction elsewhere in the body. Masking this pain doesn't just fail to help, it actively hides the information you need to address the real cause. 4 different categories, 4 different appropriate responses. But the problem is, most of the culture has a single response for all of them. Make it stop. So let's talk about the medical industry and how the medical industry has basically monetized this pain elimination. Because the pain management industry is enormous. It's huge. And its business model depends on treating the symptom rather than resolving the cause. I mean, think about it for a second, right? A pill that eliminates pain in 20 minutes is a repeatable purchase. An intervention that resolves the underlying cause is, by definition, something you eventually stop needing. Now, I'm not going to go into conspiracy theory territory or anything like that, but if you just look at it plainly, you can clearly see an incentive structure. And incentive structures shape outcomes whether or not anyone intends them to. Now, we got to be exact here, right? We got to hone in on something. Opioid prescribing in America has gone down substantially over the last decade, by like half. But the problem is that decline hasn't changed the underlying picture nearly as much as the numbers suggest. America still leads the world in pain medication consumption by a wide margin, and this is even after the reduction. So it's essentially cutting the highest number in the world in half still leaves you the highest number in the world. That's a problem. And the nature of these cuts is actually not a cultural change. This is a regulatory change. Because once the opioid crisis became undeniable and people were just like, oh no, this is actually a problem, regulations started coming out. But that didn't change the ideas and the feelings of the culture. The underlying mindset essentially remained unchanged. And that's and let's talk about that underlying mindset real quick, right? That's the instinct to reach for elimination first and investigation second. And that's still the default in a huge amount of American pain care, regardless of what the dosage numbers say. But here's the deepest issue underneath all of it. Too much of modern medicine is built around how you feel instead of how you actually are. Pain is the clearest example of that. Feeling and reality aren't necessarily a one-for-one same thing. For instance, you can have real inflammation, real tissue damage, real dysfunction building for years with no pain at all. The feeling shows up late oftentimes, and sometimes it happens after the damage is already significant. And on the other end, you can feel intense pain from something that isn't actually dangerous, where the nervous system is amplifying a signal way past what the tissue itself warrants. Inflammation, in a general sense, speaking of which, gets treated the same exact way pain does. And we should call this out too, right? Because inflammation isn't a thing to be eliminated on sight. It's a signal, just like pain is. Acute inflammation is often the body doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Responding to a training stimulus, maybe, fighting something off, repairing tissue. Suppressing it reflexively can interfere with the very adaptation you're trying to produce. And remember, one of the biggest parts of the SCOW method in terms of the body arena is to cause adaptations, positive adaptations, right? By suppressing the pain, by suppressing the inflammation, rather, you are stunting growth. But chronic inflammation potentially is in a different category. So chronic inflammation usually is a pattern that persists past its useful window, often running quietly for years before it produces a symptom you'd notice. But the fix there is the same as with the chronic warning pain. You got to investigate what's driving it. Just don't suppress the marker. So, look, you had inflammation for years and you never essentially figured out what's causing it. You're just eating an anti-inflammatory diet or taking anti-inflammatories every day. You're basically suppressing the markers without actually figuring out what's causing it in the first place. You should treat inflammation in this case like pain. You categorize it before you respond to it. Acute and adaptive gets left alone or supported. Chronic and unresolved gets investigated, not just medicated away. And that's another big part of it. Like, there's a lot of money to be made for quote unquote reducing inflammation. So, a medical system that's built around chasing a feeling rather than investigating the reality will always be a step behind. I mean, what they're doing is treating what's reported instead of what's actually happening in the body. And sure, you can run labs, figure things out from there, potentially. But there's also some hiccups with that, and I talked about that ad nauseum in previous episodes. But here's another thing for you, right? Chronic pain patients frequently report years of medication management before anyone investigated the actual mechanical, inflammatory, or structural cause of their pain. So, like, masking chronic warning pain long-term doesn't just fail to fix the problem. It often allows the underlying issue to worsen while the person numbed to the signal, mind you, keeps doing the thing that's causing the damage. Now, how does a fitness culture split it in two, but they're still making the same mistake? Back in the day, maybe 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe early 2000s, maybe the whole idea of no pain, no gain was the message. And it did real damage, in my opinion. Right now, you have a generation. At that point, you had a generation that was trained to override every single signal their body gave them. So they treated all pain as weakness to overcome. And the thing about it is, in modern days, present day, that message didn't disappear. I mean, you still have this strain of hardcore training, hustle culture type folks and they put this content out there that still glorifies grinding through the pain, and it tends to be louder and more algorithmically rewarded than most careful voices, because we already know how this goes. The extremes perform better online than nuance does. But fitness culture in general didn't just soften that message over time. A genuinely new camp emerged in reaction to it. And this camp is heavily focused on mobility, recovery, and nervous system regulation. And in a lot of corners, that reaction has kind of overcorrected into its own extreme. So they treat any discomfort as a red flag, something to modify, soothe, or avoid rather than evaluate. Now, that's not the majority, but again, you'll get to the ones who are algorithmically rewarded. How do you like that phrase? So right now, look, you don't have one bad message slowly getting replaced by a good one. You have two live camps pulling in opposite directions at the same time. And most people are left to pick a side without ever being taught the actual distinction between adaptive discomfort and warning pain. I mean, this even seeps into the supplement and recovery industry. Of course, they monetize both sides of this as well. Recovery aids are marketed to people who've been taught to override pain signals. An entirely separate market of products marketed to the mobility and recovery crowd, often without addressing the underlying skill gap in either group. The result? It's a culture that's more educated on average than it used to be, but still without a clear, teachable framework for reading pain accurately. Which is what this episode is going to try and offer. I'll offer a little bit of a few tidbits on how to read it properly. Now, I have to kind of pause here a little bit because we have to just go on this little side quest for a second, right? Why does this matter beyond the physical, though, right? Because that same confusion shows up outside of the body, right? Like emotional pain gets treated the same way. And it actually gets treated the same ways, right? It's either numbed immediately through distraction, substances, or avoidance, or the opposite is pushed through with no attention to what's actually going on, to what it's actually signaling. Grief, conviction, the discomfort of a needed confrontation, the ache of genuine growth. These are adaptive discomfort points in the heart and soul, not damage to be eliminated. There's chronic relational pain, right? The recurring hurt from the same dynamic, the same person, the same pattern. It's a warning signal, not something just to tolerate indefinitely. The skill of distinguishing between pain to push through and pain to listen to is not just a physical skill, it's a life skill. And most people were never taught in any arena. And speaking of arenas, what does this have to do with, the Scowl method, right? Because a strong body isn't a strong body that feels nothing, right? It's a body whose owner can accurately read what it's communicating. The same is true of a sound mind and a regulated heart and a discerning soul. Strategic discomfort, again, we return to this concept. Strategic discomfort depends entirely on being able to tell the difference between discomfort that builds and pain that damages. You get that distinction wrong in either direction, and you either stay fragile by avoiding all discomfort, or you break yourself by ignoring the signals that were trying to protect you. The goal was never a pain-free life. The goal is an accurately read life. But how do you tell the difference? How do you tell the difference between these types of pains and what to do with them, right? Here's something I think you could take with you, right? First thing you have to focus on is location and consistency. In other words, pain that's sharp, localized, and consistent with the specific movement is more likely a warning signal than adaptive discomfort. Next thing you have to worry about is the timing. Discomfort that fades quickly after the activity stops is usually adaptive. Pain that lingers, worsens, or appears the next day, oftentimes in a new way, deserves real attention. And the next one is function. Can you still move normally, or has the pain changed how you're compensating? Compensation is often the first sign that a warning signal is being ignored. Trend over time. Adaptive discomfort in training generally decreases as you adapt. Warning pain tends to plateau or worsen despite consistent effort. And that's also true emotionally and mentally. You become built to deal with greater things. So, adaptive discomfort really is what we're going for. Generally fades with the same thing going on. But when you're in doubt, the cost of investigating a false alarm is pretty low. But on the opposite end, the cost of ignoring a real one, that compounds. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but listen, pain was never the enemy. Pain is information, and information deserves attention, not blanket elimination or blanket suppression. The culture that sells you instant relief and the culture that sells you tolerance of everything are both selling you the same lie from opposite directions. This lie is that you don't need to develop the skill of listening. Learn to read your pain instead of just reacting to it, and you'll build a stronger body, a more honest heart, and a life that isn't running from every form of discomfort or blindly pushing through all of it. Hey, listen, if you want a practical way to start reading things like this in your own life, the Scowl Method app is coming soon. And it works like a personal trainer in your pocket. You enter your stats and your equipment, and it builds full programs, then adjusts your sets, reps, and even the weight automatically based on how you're recovering, how you're eating, and how you're performing. All of that ties together into one number, your Scowl Recovery Score. And that tells you where you actually are for the day and whether you're actually ready to take on a task of the day. Like I said, the Scowl Method app, it's coming soon. And I am going to make my way on out of here, ladies and gents. As always, I appreciate you all. Y'all take care, okay? Till next time.